shall we begin then?
Yes.
Is everybody ready? Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, and gender rebels, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this session on the creative arts and mental health. And it's my great pleasure also to welcome four distinguished speakers who will be saying a little bit about their work and their life and their journey to this point in their careers. What I propose we do is we will ask each speaker in turn to speak for 10 to 15 minutes. And then at the end, I propose to open it up for questions and contributions from the wider audience. So without further ado, let us begin with Dr. Edmundo Calici. I'll just Emilia briefly before she gives her talk. She's currently based at Middlesex University here in the UK, but has a background in countries as diverse as Italy and Australia. She's very interested in cross-cultural psychology with a focus on low to middle income countries. She's interested in human rights and mental health, suicide prevention, domestic violence, child neglect and exploitation, spirituality and faith-based traditions of healing, first-hand stories of people with lived experience of mental illness. And Emilia is also passionate about using arts-based methods and visual methods in social science research and in teaching and advocacy activities. So, Emilia, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Brian, and thank you to Raghu and Asha and others for organizing this event today. And thank you to all of you who are joining us in this Saturday. I'll be talking exactly about that. We're talking about visual methodologies. I'm going to be sharing my screen now. So hopefully I am partly disabled from screen sharing. Can somebody give me ability to be able to share my screen? I am not able to share.
Yeah, one minute, we'll do that. Right?
Okay, I am appointed host now, so I can share. The joy of being the first speaker. All right, so now you should be able to see my screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
We can see it. Good.
All working nicely, beautiful. Okay, so I am going to talk exactly about using visual methodologies in culture and global mental health for research and advocacy and activism in 10 minutes. So just to give a very, very brief kind of historical framing of this, it's important to know that the story of arts-based research practices is one that started at holistic approaches to research and began exactly at the intersection of social justice movements, as well as theoretical advances and paradigm shifts. So this is the beginning of the history of how this came about. Now, in arts-based inquiry, different kinds of art forms are very key parts of the research process. And this can be starting with formulating research questions, to then generating data, as well as analyzing data, and finally also presenting and disseminating the research findings. Now, different kinds of art forms can be used from like poetry, music, visual arts, film, photography, drama, and dance. And I've been using particularly at the beginning visual arts as well as drama and theater, as we're doing with the MeHeLP project. But I'm going to be focusing the presentation around using film and photography particularly. In fact, if you look at the history of mental health related disciplines, still images have been used since a very long time. In fact, Charcot is attributed as starting using photographs to depict physical states of the aesthetics. However, it is in the last decades that we have seen a surge of use and interest in the visual research methods. In fact, also other researchers, including also kind of number-based researcher, have started to realizing the powerful potentials of using image-based research approaches. Now, there are different reasons about why this has come about, and obviously we don't have time to cover them, but just to say two kind of reasons. As said by Grasseni, using visual methodologies can provide a deeper understanding of our informants' ways of seeing, knowing, and understanding. But not only the understanding can be deeper, people like McDougall also said, it's such a different kind of knowledge. In fact, he says, not only are certain social phenomena particularly suitable for study by visual means, but they are also extremely extremely difficult to approach in other ways. So it can also be a different way of knowing, producing different kind of knowledge. Now, as for any arts-based method, visual methods can be used in different way. Can be about just simply as reporting and documenting some kind of research, but also to generate data and disseminating knowledge and generating an impact. This is a little bit my history about how I came about personally to using film and photography in my research. So my first study actually using particularly photography and film began in India when I was doing my research in Haridwar around spirituality and prevention of suicide. In the context, I was using questionnaire, open-ended questions, I was using focus groups, individual interviews. And then because I love photography and the filming as a passion, as a hobby, I was also taking photos and also filming. So while I was doing my research using more traditional qualitative and quantitative methods, I also then organized exhibitions where I was showing some of the images I collected and also made a short documentary, which is called Haridwar, A Spiritual Journey. Then when I went in Japan as a visiting scholar, I was using drawing to explore the concept of spirituality in Japan. And while I was doing this, I was using this kind of arts-based research. I was also taking photos and again, organized exhibitions showing some of the photographs I was taking. But at the point, as me hanging photos, at the point, still my research, my kind of photography and film were more kind of in parallel to my other research methodologies. But then I realized, using the words of my friend, Roger Canals, I did not just want to incorporate the image in anthropological and in my case, psychological discourse, but I wanted to make use of images as method. I wanted to use film as a process of discovery and change, following also what Paul Ellie, my supervisor at the time, wrote. Documentary film is not a way of communicating knowledge and understanding that has been arrived at by some other means, but is a process of discovery in itself, which generates knowledge and understanding through all the stages of productions. So that was exactly my kind of shift towards using film as my main method of research, as well as photographs. Now, while visual research methods have been used quite extensively within other social sciences, particularly anthropology and sociology, within mental health, and particularly culture and mental health, which are my specific area of interest and knowledge, are very rarely used, at least at the time where I started making use of them. And so what then I've been doing in the kind of more than a decade of my work has been using ethnographic film as well as also participatory visual methods as a standalone research method with the objective of then using as a public engagement tool within cultural and mental health. So what I've been doing and focusing on is what I define applied public and activist visual psychology, kind of using the language used by Sarah Pink to indicate anthropology. In short, what basically I'm talking about is about film as research for change, where the ultimate objective is producing an impact, having a change. So that's kind of the work I've been focusing on. And because of that, I started something which is called the movement, which, as the name suggests, aims to use arts-based and visual methodologies to promote, support, and ignite action and change, particularly within mental health and prevention of suicide, as well as human rights. So my main project I've been working in almost now 10 years on is around human rights and mental health, with a series of projects around called Breaking the Chains that basically focuses around an issue which is defined in Indonesia with the term pasung, which refers to the physical restraint or confinement of criminals, crazy and dangerously aggressive people. Pasung as a practice, so chaining and other form of restraints, is quite widespread in Indonesia, as well as unfortunately many other low and middle income countries, but actually forms of human rights abuses exist all over the world, sadly. So my focus has been on this issue. When I started, as also observed by Mina Sediatri, there was very little attention towards this phenomena. What we mainly had was media attention, which, as often happens sadly with media, was giving a very kind of shallow, sometimes misleading portrayal of what actually this issue was, why people were, the mental health issues were restrained in Indonesia. So then I decided to make a film. Unfortunately, I can't show you the trailer. I think we have not enough time, but you can find the trailer in my website. So I made this ethnographic documentary film looking exactly about what is the meaning of chaining within Indonesia. Then this year, I also released another film always connected to Breaking the Chains, which is called Anto Story, which is a different kind of film. It's a more collaborative film where I've been working with Anto, who has co-directed and co-edited the film, to represent his experience, how he has made sense of being chained, but also now his role as one of the main Indonesian advocates on human rights and mental health. You can watch the film on my website. Now, this project here belongs to what we'll define participatory and collaborative visual methodologies. You might have heard some of the other examples, like photo voice and participatory video. Again, for sake of time, I can't talk much about it. But in summary, they're kind of very empowering visual methodologies where communities of a group of people are given a vehicle, a tool to communicate their needs and ideas to decision makers and other groups and communities. So within this umbrella of collaborative and participatory methodologies, you can find also another film I made around my grandfather, which is called the Songs of Memory and Songs of Love. But also you find the project around the suicide. So I've been working in Australia with different artists who actually have experienced with suicidal behavior, and we are represented through an exhibition as well as a movie called Inspired Lives, their understanding and their experience around prevention of suicide. So these are some images from this exhibition. And you can find more information in the website, as well as the film. And then finally, another project also has been around using digital storytelling with people from migrants and refugee background, again in Australia, to represent their journeys of recovery. And this project is called Finding Our Way. So you can find 9 stories, short story where people are represented in their own way, their experience and their understanding around their own journeys of recovery. And finally, currently, although currently COVID obviously is disrupting everything right now, but anyway, we are completing another SRC GLCF funded project that aims to use ethnographic film and also visual participatory methodologies to explore attempts by mental health workers in Ghana, Indonesia, to establish collaboration with faith-based and traditional healers to prevent the use of coercion and provide better care for people with mental health issues. We're going to be having a preview event on the 1st of December. So if you're interested to see some of the excerpts of these movies and also hearing some of the preliminary fundings, you can go in a movement.org website, and then you can find information about how to join us also on that day. So concluding, very, very short overview of this work, but I guess the main point for me to make is that, as Kanas says, the intellectual and political challenges we face today are too complex to cast aside one of the greatest resources available to us. We live in a global society whose language of communication is digital and visual, even more so today in the kind of online world we are living. So if they want to reach their goals, I strongly believe mental health disciplines and human rights advocacy must embrace this reality. In conclusion, the current context of mental health care is one where I believe where applied activists and public users of audiovisual tools have an increasing role to play. Particularly ethnographic and participatory methodologies, photography, any kind of visual methods are very powerful resources for the search, communication, dissemination, capacity building, but also activism, advocacy, education, public engagement in mental health. So I invite you all to learn more about this. If you want to see more of my own work, you can also join in Twitter and follow in Facebook, as well as my blog in movement.org. And I hope to see you on the 1st of December. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's fascinating. And also highlights the role of art and visual methods as a kind of universal language. One of the things that struck me on visiting India for some of our GCRF projects is the way that so many people were coming up to me and saying, selfie, 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 selfie. You know, taking photographs of one another seems to be a kind of lingua franca that links many nations and people from many walks of life. So,
Absolutely.
You know, that's fascinating. And I shall certainly be following up some of the links you gave in your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Nadia Sviridzenka, who's one of my colleagues here at De Montfort University, and it's been my great pleasure to work with Nadia both in our Mary Seacole Research Centre Research Institute and on one of our GCRF projects looking at mental health literacy in Kerala. Oh, and Armenia too, of course. Nadia is interested in social psychology in cross-cultural contexts, and with a focus on self and identity processes, especially in children and adolescents. And Nadia has also been working on and developing a theory called identity structure analysis, and is interested in the development of self and identity through the human life cycle. So take it away, Nadia.
Thank you, Brown. And yes, thank you for including me in this discussion. It's great to hear, different researcher and practitioner stories around using creative methods, particularly for mental health and researching mental health and mental health advocacy. And thank you everybody for joining and who is listening. I was reflecting on this, and I don't have jazzy slides like Armenia did, so this is a bit more of a reflection. I came to use creative methods with our MeHeLP project. So this was quite a new learning process for me. And I was reflecting on kind of my history as a psychologist from a very traditionally trained educational background. So with undergrad in the States, I did my master's in cross-cultural psychology at Brunel. I did training in social and developmental psychology in Scotland. And was based in sort of mental health research centers of Greenwood Institute of Child Mental Health with the University of Leicester, and all have kind of reinforced this idea of traditional right methods of studying human psychology and of understanding human behavior. So creative methods and methodologies offer a different way of understanding diversity, of understanding sort of psychological processes that we're interested in, like mental health. So this is a reflection on kind of how can you merge into creative methods of kind of what things I had to kind of negotiate, I guess, from kind of traditional training and to incorporate that. The one first point, kind of the catalyst of understanding what we understand as truth or truth behavior in terms of what are we studying, and this idea that with science we're looking at something that is replicable, something that is objective, and the benefit of creative methods that offer this artistic, more contentious, more multiplicity of truths in our experience, which is what we experience when we're looking at art, when we're experiencing art. We have our own process, we have our own understanding. And so this kind of initial challenge to this idea that whatever truth about behavior, about mental health that we can find is not objective, it's multiple, it can be partial, and can be quite fluid. And challenge this idea of very natural and right ways of studying human behavior in psychology, which can be quite reductible. This idea of a neutral researcher, this idea of a controlled environment, this idea where we can isolate, certain variables and study the purity of human behavior, and kind of moving away from that to more creative way of collaboration, of participation in research, and sort of multiplicity of meaning and the value of context in that we cannot leave ourselves, our identities, our cultures, our backgrounds at the door of a lab. We cannot leave them outside of our questionnaires. We cannot disentangle ourselves from our research. So it's honoring that kind of relationship and honoring ourselves and our backgrounds. And how can we incorporate that in research? So similar to what Armenia has talked about, kind of this infusion of photo voice, of video methods, of understanding, of giving a different quality to interview, something that is a very traditional method, but by incorporating creative methods, we can actually generate more insight. We can actually connect with our participant, connect with ourselves as researchers through that process. The other aspect that I feel is quite strongly within the discipline of psychology, and I think within this kind of empirical perspective, is the idea of value-free research. So you don't have your values, you're neutral. This idea of neutrality being valued as objective. And it's quite appealing that with creative methods, they kind of put it on its head a little bit, because it is value laden, and we are doing it from our values. So with the creative ethical methodologies, we actually have sort of transformative research frameworks, things that focus on decolonizations, the emancipation of groups. We're looking at feminist research, participatory methodologies that allow us to give voice and agency to the participants that we're studying, as opposed to kind of remove any kind of value from the context that we're actually studying. Interesting work that we're doing in India and in MeHeLP is around this, mental health of communities, and how do you decolonize the idea of mental health, this, the Western idea around sort of medical perspective on it, on this imposed right way of understanding mental health, and how do you disentangle that and provide, participants, the people who are interacting with the project, the agency, the scope, and the tools to communicate their own understanding around mental health, which can be quite liberating, can be quite empowering. And it's harnessing this type of methodologies to do just that, and not to fight it in kind of this kind of subjective paradigm, isn't it, of this is the right way of doing science, this is the right way of doing research, and kind of challenging that. And it's been quite a transformative process for me to learn about that and to kind of engage with that. But I think we need to challenge ourselves to be able to break out of the paradigms we've been trained in to some extent. So this idea of like, what is proper science kind of thing. There's an interesting research also around in Canada that I've read about doing work with Aboriginal athletes, and how interviews were done alongside drawings. And they chose mandalas as way of kind of telling their stories that were then brought to the community, and they were displayed within the communities. So what happens through using creative methodologies in this way, in this value kind of focused way, is to create new knowledge, but also have an interaction between individual and communities as well, and to kind of for the transformative process. And when we situate that within the culture, we pick the creative methods, we understand creativity, we understand the language through the lens of culture. So what has been interesting in the MeHeLP project is theater is such a natural performance, isn't it, in an Indian context? It's such a natural way of communicating, of engaging. So it was very intuitive method to use from kind of the variety of different creative methodologies that somebody can pick from. Some of the ones that Armenia has exemplified quite nicely as well in her work. So it's about, how do you then use this creativity, but also have that come naturally from the context that you're studying, and picking the practice that is organic within the context, and use that in your research. So it is about having these ideas about where you come from, how do you understand truth, how do you understand reality in some sense, not to get too philosophical about it, but where does your value come from as a researcher? What do you intend to do with your research? How do you intend to empower your participants? And how does it guide your decision making as a researcher? From it's a complete process, from picking up the topic, from defining your research questions, from looking at your methods of both data collection and analysis, from kind of presentation of your results and your dissemination to community. And I think Armenia gave a lot of interesting examples of how visual methods, for example, can be used throughout. We've used theater in the MeHeLP project as both ways of engaging with communities and building rapport, as well as data collection, and plan to use some of that in analysis, COVID permitting. So you can integrate them at different stages of research. And I think that's an interesting and quite valuable perspective to have. But it can be very uncomfortable as well. And I think, again, reflecting on training and reflecting on the traditional and right ways of doing research, creative methods can be uncomfortable for the researcher. It can be uncomfortable for your colleagues or for the field in general. I think, first of all, if you're trying to form art into a box that is scientific academia, that doesn't translate quite naturally. So it's kind of trying not to force things together. If your value approach in terms of decolonization and emancipation and fundamentally challenging power structures within society and creating some change there, they will be uncomfortable. Any change is uncomfortable, and on such a great level it will be, of course. And challenging norms within a discipline is challenging, from, again, conversations with colleagues, from conversations with, publishers and everything else, and having people accept that as a valid way of working and looking and researching, I think can be challenging. So this idea, what I came to, is sort of making research as opposed to doing or conducting it. You make research with participants, you make research around a particular topic with particular values. But I think with that comes greater understandings of topics and problems in very different ways, a different lens of thinking about mental health than we probably have been trained to do. So it's been quite transformative for me, but hopefully the project will be transformative for the population that we have done this with. So yeah, that's sort of my little bit of reflection on this.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Nadia. And in some ways it corresponds to my own impressions looking at countries like India, where I've been told proudly by more than one person that, hey, we've got a tradition of theatre and performance that stretches back unbroken for thousands of years, whereas, kind of barbarians like me in Europe, well, the ancient Greeks, and then we forgot about it for 1,500 years, and it sort of popped up again with Shakespeare. But, the way that those traditions of performance are so fundamental and so deeply embedded within some cultures, well, I suppose within most human cultures, come to think of it, gives us another language with which to understand the human condition. So talking about performance, that segues very neatly into our next speaker. And next we have Dr. Shahimi Chakraborty, if I'm pronouncing you correctly.
Yes.
And on your website, you describe yourself as a sociologist and dance activist, and you're one of the founders of Kolkata Sanved, I believe. And you've been promoting and pioneering the use of dance and movement therapy. Now, there's a long tradition of using dance and movement therapy for therapy and rehabilitation and for a variety of mental health and physical health problems. But I think perhaps distinctive to your approach is the way you're seeking to use dance and movement therapy to facilitate empowerment, to facilitate social change, and to empower and enhance the lives and the trajectories of the people who we work with. Take it away, Dr. Chakraborty.
Thank you, Brown, and thank you, MeHeLP. Thank you, Asha. Thank all of you, Nadia and Armenia, as a co-panelist. I think what we all know that globally dance movement therapy has more than 60 plus years history to using, and it's an integrated body-mind approach. But what Kolkata Sanved bring into the global DMT space, and also into the mental health or social development, framework, is the important part is bringing a perspective to see it's a tool for psychosocial rehabilitation. And that psychosocial rehabilitation is not only limited to the healing, but bringing and developing healer, dance movement therapy practitioner, and the leaders from the survivor and the community, and making them as a professional dance movement therapy practitioner. So I think that's the entire model. Sampurnata is a significant contribution of Kolkata Sanved. Let me start with a very brief about Kolkata Shongbed. It's a women-led pioneer in the field of dance movement therapy for trauma healing, empowerment, and psychosocial rehabilitation of marginalized population. But majorly, we are our major work with the survivor of sexual violence and gender-based violence, including sex trafficking. But we also working with people living with mental illness and other marginalized communities. And we use dance movement therapy in 3 areas for prevention, promotion, and rehabilitation. So we use DMT as a tool for promoting holistic well-being and enhancement of quality of life. So here again, what we wanted to bring an approach is which need to look at beyond clinical, not seeing, even when we talk about the therapy or we talk about the dance, sometimes elitism, elitist approach always come. So people do not have, when we started our program, so people do not have much access into the therapy, including creative art therapy. So when we started our program, we have decided how we can develop a community-focused, cost-effective model and program and approach, which can be available for all kind of people. So people can access it, including the low resource setup. And creating what I said, creating a pool of dance movement therapy practitioner from the grassroots level and from survivor is Kolkata Shongbed's significant contribution in global DMT approach. And we work through a wider network of partners in India and South Asia. So it's a collaborative model. We collaborate with NGO, academics, INGO, civil society organization, grassroots level organization, and reach out to various community. And Shongbed model has known as Sampurnata, that means fulfillment. So finding out an individual potential. So seeing an individual in a holistic manner and look at moreover look at the wellness perspective or overall well-being and not from a lens of problem or illness perspective. And honed over the past 2 decades, Sampurnata is a globally recognized approach today, and it's Shongbed's innovative contribution to the field of mental health, gender equality, and livelihood development. So this program, you know, so we have spoke about the prior to me, my 2 other panelists also spoke about the research and how other art works. So one very important thing need to be understand that, you know, this is also a science because it's work through mind and body. So, but believing on that, you know, so I am talking specifically from dance and dance movement therapy perspective. So believing in that is also today a very difficult area. And that's why advocacy is very important. Because I think Nadia also mentioned, so any kind of, you know, change is an uncomfortable area, and when you are talking about that art can bring a change, you know, art can transform the lives, art is able to, you know, able to use in the research methodology or as research methodology. So those areas is still less and rarely explored area. So my, you know, question, and Kolkata Shongbed's program is always wanted to bring this into the bigger network. For example, like we have a huge collaboration with Tata Institute of Social Sciences under their Center for Lifelong Learning. And we run one diploma academic program, dance movement therapy diploma academic program from TISS. And also we jointly brought an advocacy program. We launched a national advocacy in 2016. It's a biennial summit to building an ecosystem for art-based intervention, you know, in the country for healing, well-being, and change. So the question is, we are not talking, it's named as dance movement therapy for change, but we always spoke about art-based intervention because India also has 1,000 years of history of arts. If you see the variety, form of dance elements, each dance form, each art form has a therapeutic elements, to contribute to people's lives. So I think people need to look, from that lens when we are talking. So art is not only quote unquote performance. Art, definitely art for art's sake, has its own, pedagogy, training, history, and everything. But also art need to see in different way as well, not only as an entertainment. Specifically, I can talk about dance, either only seeing as an entertainment or very high elitist approach. How many people can access that? So breaking that stereotype and bringing into the mass is very important point. And as a group, we need to take that. And research and advocacy is one of the key area which can take it. And that's how, if you say even the Sampurnata model, like I am as a practitioner, even I did my PhD from TISS on this model, further examining that how we can legitimize this model into the academic level. Even most of the time you can see that the researcher from the university or from the academics goes to the field and practice what practitioner is doing. But I really, and Kolkata Sangved suggests just do the opposite, because you have the experience, you have the knowledge. So let's take that knowledge to the academics and academia. And I think that's, can really build more qualitative research and advocacy if we can come together. So even in our that summit, we not only called or invited only art-based practitioner. In this summit, the government people, the medical fraternity, the other kind of like social development organization. So we bring people together to talk about. And also in Kolkata Sangved program, in Sampurnata model, today I am much more trying to connect on the research and advocacy. So each and every step, this is also an important part for art-based practitioner document your process. Because, different art part, or I can speak about dance and dance movement therapy because it's the experiential process. So it's very subjective. It depends individual to individual. So it's not always able to, measure in a very quantitative way. So there is a quantitative path, but there is also a qualitative. The most dance movement therapy research also based in qualitative way, like based on qualitative research, including my research, but Kolkata Sangved also invested on both quality and quantitative research. And we also developed, like a group dance movement therapy scale. So, so I think those are important so that we can blend the discipline. It is mental health, we can adapt from mental health framework, and then we can blend the discipline, and then we can also strengthen. So when I am talking about art-based intervention or dance movement therapy as an intervention, don't see it from a narrow lens. We need to see it much more broader lens, where this entire program, and that is Kolkata Sangved approach. When we are talking about like psychosocial rehabilitation, so it's not only limited to a healing. So it's also bringing a lot of other things. So that means like how a person can build agency within themselves so that they can individually break the systemic barriers from their lives. And I think those part is so important when we are practicing for a change using dance movement therapy or other art-based intervention. And I'm sure that a lot of people who are practicing, they practice like artists themselves are very passionate. So I am also, when I am talking, I think my entire body is using. So it's so important. Sometimes we forgot, like, you know, our body, if we say about dance movement therapy, I said it's an integrated body mind approach, and our body restored all the knowledge, experience, everything, and we just overlook the issue. But when we are connecting through our, you know, talking about as a holistic self, you cannot overlook to your body. So here I am alive. How you will be, you know, explain that I am alive. So art has a universal language. Dance has a universal language. Dance is the first language, first primitive language of any human being. To, you know, even before we talk, we make movement. So that is our dance. So dance means, so not only how beautifully, gracefully I am performing in the stage. It's not like that, but how I am expressing, how I am using my body. I am using my body for a healing, expression, liberation, freedom, emotional regulation, agency, empowerment, and for a change. So I think that's actually very briefly Sampurnata model. And Kolkata Sangved also have another leadership academy, which we call Survivor DMT Leadership Academy, where we honored the lived experience. It's very important because a survivor know the best for their life. So believe on them, and if they have potential, they required a space to nurture and grow. And I think this is the time also to rethink the way we think always traditionally, because it was Kolkata Sangved's huge struggle to accept survivor, like Kolkata Sangved's huge struggle to establish this model and accept a survivor as a dance movement therapy practitioner. It is still a huge challenge, but we gave that challenge to the entire, you know, even the DMT community and all other community, that if art has a universal language, definitely you need a theoretical background. And that if you can learning only cannot happen intellectually. It's also happen, you know, through different way. So if we can really, you know, make ourselves a little broader and little open, little flexible, and I feel art has that power, and we need to advocate that. And there also all discipline need to come together, all discipline. So it's medical, mental health, social development, art itself, you know, different kind of art, anthropology, all need to come together and strengthen the system and build the ecosystem. Because as we are seeing, and today's forum is also that how, you know, the power of art, showing the power of art into the mental health, for mental health and, you know, well-being, overall well-being. So it is very, very important to think and reflect whether we are really believing on it. So if we are not believing on it, then it will be not possible. So that's all. That's how we work. That's how, you know, my message to the people who are seeing, or yeah, so come together and build that ecosystem and really make that believe that art has the power for transformation, empowerment, change, healing, and overall well-being.
Thank you. That was very interesting, and it's something I'm more and more convinced of the older I get, that movement, that physical activity, that's how we hold ourselves in space, how we engage, you know, as you were saying, things like as simple as gestures and bodily movements while we're communicating. These are fundamental to the human condition and have often been neglected, I think, in the academic canon. And you were also talking about the way that people with lived experience of adversity have become facilitators, leaders in their own right, and that's an important struggle which a number of professions are grappling with. So I think that's it's all interesting stuff, and perhaps something we can return to a little later in the questions and discussion. So now moving on, finally, last but not least, I'd like to introduce Asha Banu, whom I've had the pleasure of working with on our MeHeLP mental health literacy project in Kerala. Asha is a professor in social work and public health in the Tata Institute, and focuses upon public health, social work and mental health, and is interested in children affected by HIV and AIDS, aging and elder abuse, and community health, community mental health and development, social gerontology, so right throughout the life cycle then. Take it away, Asha, the floor is yours.
So good evening, and it's a Saturday evening in India and a Saturday afternoon there for you all, but we are all connected. And I also could see all our MeHeLP team, or most of the members of the MeHeLP team amongst the panelists. So I'm happy to see everyone. Before starting, I would begin with what Shahimi mentioned, that her survivors, and when she ended with survivors and she spoke about survivors, I thought I should begin with that. And that's what really made us so impressed about her model and go ahead to collaborate and continue our collaboration with Shanved, because the survivors spoke. It's about the assertion they had, and the survivors are the trainers. In fact, I would say that some of the TOTs Shahimi conducted, I was a trainee and her survivors were the trainers, and it was like a truly emancipatory practice. And thank you, Shahimi, for sharing your model with us as a university. So for me, my presentation is going to be primarily how I started my journey as a researcher and how I started exploring creative methods or art-based research methods into my research projects. As social work practitioners and researchers, when we engage on certain sensitive research concerns, we always land up facing certain challenges. Always we feel that maybe my interview schedule or the tools that I've constructed is not so adequate. Maybe the language is definitely not suitable to the target population I am collecting data from. Maybe I'm not going to achieve the research goals I've envisaged. Often we end up thinking that definitely there is a gap, or are we missing out on something? So this is a constant reflection and a dilemma as a researcher, particularly when we are engaging in some sensitive issues. So I recall several such instances, but I will take you back to some years ago when I was collecting data from children affected by HIV. And the research context is Andhra Pradesh. So in India, as all of us know, we speak different languages. When I'm collecting data from children and young adults and young adolescents, and having to understand only the language, and again, there is a mediator who is collecting the data for me, but I'm only observing. And I could see children affected by HIV who are going through a lot of psychosocial and emotional concerns sitting before the researcher, uninterested. And through many ways, they are demonstrating that they are not interested in the project or giving data. And also obviously mentioning that they have been subjected to a number of interview schedules and tools. So when I am challenged that what I'm going to do, we have the tool and we have the researcher to collect the data. We have done a training. Now, what are we going to do? And the next day we all came up, okay, let's introduce certain creative methods into our project. So we sat with the tool and we actually broke. And the first tool we introduced was River of Life. Rather than asking and listing a set of questions A, B, C, D, I'm talking about 2006 and 7. That time there is not much of a writing on arts-based research or creative methods. So it was almost like how as the social workers, we have certain participatory tools, and how I'm using the participatory tools into research, and how participatory tools in research has brought out some newer dimension to that particular research and added lots of value to that research. So when we initiated with this River of Life, I could see such transformation in children. Children started participating. I can still recall how certain emotions they could not describe otherwise came out with this particular tool. A voice, his anger. He said that there is lot of fury, there is outburst, and the river is changing course. And you're asking why all the while the rivers were flowing smooth. Why are you saying there is a flood now? Why do you feel there is a flood now, and why it is changing course? Then the boy explained, the entire community abandoned my family. Nobody came for my father's last rites because of taboo against the disease. And if nobody could connect to me at that particular juncture, I don't want to be part of this community. And I'm so angry and I'm so furious and I'm changing course. So these are certain things which we cannot be capturing through an interview schedule. So the river of life became one popular technique for the entire research team, because all the children connected to it and they beautifully created the pathways in the form of a river. And also we started discussing on that. We started discussing on the created images of the river. The participants were able to really connect, and there was a deeper level of communication and understanding. So this was really an eye-opener as a researcher, that it's really important to connect to the target audience and what would facilitate expression of emotions, and also being appropriate to that particular context. So in this particular river of life, there are several examples how different girls opened up, how different boys, what are the gender dimensions, what is stigma, what is discrimination. There are certain spaces where they said, that, there would be lots of sheep there, and, the river is going aside. Why? Because the girl will say, my relative said that I have to go and take care of the sheep and not go to school. There are different dimensions that the children would explain alongside the river of life. And through this process, there was a strong rapport between the study participants, between the research team, and the outcome. The outcome definitely enriched the findings of the study. And also the important dimension, we understood parentification of the process is common, or almost all the children affected by HIV had, and also the various struggles that the children with HIV go through these different forms of telling stories. From then on, I as a researcher became too conscious on using appropriate methods, and also enjoy the flexibility and richness it offers to our work. So while I work with children affected by HIV surrounding stigma and discrimination, subsequently also I had to work with children in tribal communities, where they were so hesitant to talk about menstrual hygiene, sexual health. And then again, we had focus group discussions, and you could see that only girls look at each other and giggle, and they do not talk about anything. And again, here we found that it is very important to use different techniques. And we wanted the girls to come, we created different strategies to get the data. And also there was one occasion where we found there is so much of an inequity in the community in terms of girls doing certain set of jobs and boys doing certain set of jobs. And when you're collecting data in terms of what are the roles, they did not. But then when you made them to perform role plays, and that to reverse role plays in terms of girls playing the roles of boys and the boys playing the roles of girls, and it beautifully came out, the stereotypes, the expectations of the community from a young boy and from a young girl. So these are several occasions that I found that's very important, that when we want to capture multiple realities, emotions surrounding the particular participant, it's very important to it's very important that we use creative methods. And after that, I've always started questioning the purpose of the study, what role art can play in my study to accomplish the purpose of my study. And also I question myself, am I evolving context-specific methods? And also we are all privileged that over the years, we see a range of creative methods and so much of a discussion and articulation on what is the appropriateness and when and how we can choose appropriate methods for our research studies. So having said this, there are several studies where I've engaged, including the MeHeLP project. There is always a great space for different creative methods, be it using photos, be it storytelling. Now with MeHeLP, it is about theater. All of this is very participatory, and there are several insights as a researcher I have gained. First and foremost is when there is no vocabulary for a research participant to engage in the research project, when the traditional approaches of questioning is failing in the research project, definitely art-based research methods provide a pathway. Two, it is very context specific. One creative method that works and is very efficient in one context may not be working in all contexts. Same way, age-specific method also has to be used. This is also one other insight. The third insight is the participant should feel that they are an important stakeholder and are key players. If it looks like, okay, I'm constructing something for you, you have to perform, it is not going to be. Again, it becomes like very top-down, and we are going to be influencing. But the participant should feel that they are going to bring something and to the table, and that kind of importance is given to the stakeholders. And the next insight is the data collection phase enhances awareness of the study participants while they are performing. For us, it's a data collection process. But then during the data collection process, by performing that role, there is an enhanced awareness amongst the study participants. This is also something I found during our community plays in the MeHeLP study in Kerala, that different participants could actually understand, and there was an awareness. If I have to say, it's also ability to see diverse perspectives. Like, for example, we have collected narratives from users, we have collected narratives from caregivers, we have collected narratives from community members. When we are pulling strings, somewhere there is a caregiver, there is a community member, there is a user in the street play or in the community play. That, and the audience is also user, community member, and a caregiver. Somewhere the caregiver can see what differently they could have done in the caregiving process. The user may feel, okay, maybe I have to make a course change here. The community member feels how appropriate my behavior was in the entire process, how I am part of the entire discrimination process. So somewhere it is an enlightening process. It's data collection, there are narratives, you're doing community play, but then in the process of data collection itself, we are creating an impact in the way how these actors look at the entire process. So I feel it is very emancipatory. So that way the change, the data collection phase in itself enhances awareness and also brings in change. To put it in a nutshell, all my insights, I will say the creative methods, the art-based research methods are really participatory. It's very inclusive. Even a silent member in the community will want to come and join and perform a particular role. Is empowering and transformative. I have not seen any other traditional methods having this potential, the transformative potential, that each and every audience, that each and every player transforms before the research process ends. That kind of power I have not seen in any of the traditional methods. This is my way of looking at how I've evolved insights over the few years. Hope I was audible.
Okay, yes, thank you. Yes, that's very interesting. And it's something that applies to your presentation and to many of the others, that these creative and art-based approaches offer whole new ways of eliciting participants' experiences, enabling people to make sense to themselves and to the researcher of what's happening. Traditionally within the social sciences, we've relied a great deal on questionnaires and interview methods, but these don't necessarily work terribly well for everybody or for all issues. So the use of these kinds of creative methods, and we've talked about things like drama, about dance, about photography and visual methods, and so on. These offer a new kind of arena for people to express and transform themselves, and a new layer of data which we can explore. Okay, so well, I'd like to extend my warmest thanks to our intrepid presenters. So thank you very much for, as they say in the theatre, treading the boards, even virtually. Now, I think we've got a few minutes for some opportunities for questions and discussion. So maybe we could kick that off with, I'm just looking at the Q&A feature on Zoom, and somebody said, is escapism from reality a part of creativity or the creative mind? Do you think the same escapism will prompt one to escape from one's own creativity? Do any of our panelists have any responses to that?
I guess I have a bit of a consideration in terms of can we escape reality, or do we transform reality that we live in? And even by escaping what we consider reality, someone else might create their own. And I think it's here creative methods can be quite useful in understanding what that reality is by eliciting it, because we will not have the tools to connect with that individual ourselves because we come from a different perspective. So I think for cultural reasons, for mental health reasons, I think connecting with whatever reality the individual lives with, I think it gives us the tools to do that and to get an insight to that. So I don't think there's one reality. I think we all kind of create our own. And I think what the benefit of creative and art-based methods is to understand what reality individuals live in and kind of go from that mutual understanding then. So that would be kind of my interpretation and kind of answer to that.
Yeah, so what I think that using art-based intervention specifically, when we use dance movement therapy, so it's kind of, for me, it's very important to reflect and acknowledge my own reality. So as soon as I'm acknowledging my reality, we are stepping, we are taking a step to moving ahead. So it's not escapism. So it's acknowledging, which help me to, regulate myself, and which we are doing in a creative process. Because if we see the therapy, so it's a artistic process. And in this process, actually, I am creating. So it's no other people are creating. So it's a creative process and a creative resolution, which I am bringing into my process.
For me, as Nadia mentioned, I wanted to ask the person a reverse question. Whose reality we are talking about? There are multiple realities. Whose reality?
Yes, and sometimes it might be a nice idea to try out different realities. We don't necessarily have to be embedded in a single one. To go back to something that Shahimi was saying a few minutes ago, for example, if I've been subject to, if I were a girl who's been subject to child abuse or domestic violence, that doesn't have to be the master status. Through dance and movement therapy, perhaps I can become a leader, a facilitator, a trainer, and that's in some ways that's a good kind of escapism.
And I'm not escaping. I'm acknowledging. Yeah. I'm acknowledging, and I am transforming.
Yes, yes. I mean, maybe, it's transformational. It's perhaps escaping from oppression or victim status, and moving on, transforming to something that's perhaps a bit more empowered and has a few more opportunities in life.
And I have Dr. Brown, I just wanted to say, please introduce yourself. You introduced all of us.
Yeah. I beg your pardon. Just, yes, I forgot. Yes, well, it says on my little window there, Brian Brown. I try and get my friends just to call me Brown. I'm at Dementia University, as well as Nadia and Raghu, where I'm Professor of Health Communication. But in the last few years, I've been interested in the role of the creative disciplines in promoting health, promoting mental health, physical health, enabling transformation and empowerment. With some colleagues, we call what we do the health humanities. The medical humanities have been around for a while, but there's lots of other people, service users and carers, people in the creative therapeutic disciplines, nurses, even physiotherapists who want to get involved as well. So that's what we've been doing, and I've been working with Nadia and Raghu on various projects where it's often turned out to be community theatre is the medium used. Working in India, in Pune, with internal migrants, and in Kerala on this mental health literacy project, which we've mentioned briefly. So that's what I do for a living. So thank you for asking. Okay, would anybody else like to ask a question or offer our panelists something to respond to? Make yourselves known somehow.
Can I say something, Brown?
Oh, please do, Raghu, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, a very interesting and enlightening presentation from all of you. And I think looked at the reality of research and how we engage with people and communities in terms of the, how the kind of building that agency and making it more than just a research exercise. It's the lived experience. And I think that is very important. And I think the point that I want to make is actually in some of those creative approaches, in all the creative approaches, all the things that the panelists have actually said, there is that mutual learning process. And I think that is crucial in research, because traditional research, when we talk about the research is just a research and goes home, and the participant is still a participant, and the participant is a passive agent in that exercise. And I think all the medical research currently done, the so-called RCTs that we actually consider to be gold standard of research, it is actually a very weak way of actually doing things. And we have a standard measure, we actually look at that, but we are not actually understanding the participants' exercises, their lived experiences, their ingenuity, and their kind of creativity and all those kind of stuff as well. So I think it's important that other methods of actually doing research, the creative arts and how we actually engage with the process, the emancipatory, the participatory processes, that has got that, the added advantage, the added value of that mutual learning process. And I think research is actually for development of the community and of the people. So if we don't actually create that environment for mutual learning, what is, how is it that we are actually doing other forms of research? And I think that is why, we need to try and understand that the so-called medical research, as we consider as top-rated in the world, has got major limitations. I'm currently rereading the book of Ivan Illich, Limits to Medicine. And I think it's clearly identified since 1971 to this age. Still, we haven't moved an inch further in relation to understanding health and illness and how, the contribution that us as community members, us as population, can actually make towards that well-being process.
Yeah. Having said that, I'm not too negative about randomized controlled trials myself, because after all, if I was going to undertake a medical treatment, if I was going to have my pancreas taken out or my leg amputated or something, I would like to know that I was going to do better than the placebo group or the control group. That this is actually going to be worthwhile. And with many common treatments, of course, the advantage is often very limited when people test them out like that. So in some ways, though, that reinforces the need for the sorts of things that we're doing and we've been talking about today. Things that empower people, things that enhance quality of life, things that give people new languages and new ways to have dialogues. Because if you wait for the drugs to work, you could be waiting a very long time. So that's my piece. I'm supposed to be keeping quiet. I'm supposed to be facilitating. I beg your pardon. Would anybody else like to comment on this? Oh, Nadia's unmuted her microphone. Are you going to say something, Nadia?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that there's a question in the chat around from Pruba, How we got enlightened with 3 different forms of creative arts for mental health. Is there any one string attaching all these forms of creation of arts? And I think Raghu possibly mentioned to some extent to that around the mutual learning process, but I was kind of gonna, I'm sort of a moderator a little bit here, just saw that question come in, didn't want to get lost.
Also, there is a question from Andy.
I just wanted to respond, that Purba's question that all art has a unique form, like all art form has their unique, nature. So it is interlinked and it has its independent uniqueness also. So there is enormous possibilities of collaboration, and that's how we all are talking about. And also there is, exploration where it's independently work, like theater, visual art, paintings, music. So it has its own independent, uniqueness and forms and history and culture. And also it is very interlinked, because when I use dance movement therapy, I also use the support of the music. I also use the support of the colors. I also use the support of the, films as well. But the unique nature of the major part is using body and movement. So I think it's same also with other arts, but it is also coming together, together in a platform where we are advocating that how art-based intervention has the power for change or bringing, new modalities into the research and other interventions. So that's how I can reflect.
So has anybody else got a comment on?
I can hear you, Armenia.
Emilia, are you?
Can you hear me? Ah, yes. Sorry, no.
Yeah.
My microphone was up.
Okay,
Just wanted to add what Shahimi was saying about why there is a uniqueness in some way to the different art forms. I do also see like kind of the common string, as Purba said, to be somehow the which also was reflected on what Raghu said around the rejection, the kind of positivistic, reductionistic approach to seeing humans. So there is a kind of common element about beginning from that rejection that I guess all of us here share. And seeing more than wanted to reduce our experiences to some variables, and actually at the opposite, see the richness, and how can we not only understand the richness, but create a platform where that richness is not seen as a problem, a statistical kind of, how do we deal with this complexity, but it's actually what we want to explore and be able to convey. So I see that as a string, and also somehow a democratization of research. In a usual traditional research, especially biomedical, as Raghu was saying, there is somebody who has the power and the people who are object of this. And it's much more separation between participants and the researcher, while in the kind of approach we use, and I guess this is my experience, but I guess it might be the experience of Shahimi and Brown and Asha and everybody else doing this kind of work in the field, it is much more democratic and is much more kind of almost at the same level. We are co-learning, as Raghu was saying, and I think that's a very, very big shift from the way in which research is taught and is represented then to the public.
Can I just add to that as well? I think I completely agree with both Shahini and Armenia around those topics. And I think thinking about, transformation and change for using these methodologies and these methods, it's, yes, you want to create transformation in the community. Yes, you want to generate new knowledge and everything else. But I think what you're transforming just by employing these methods and engaging with them is you're transforming your own relationship and your position as a researcher. You're challenging that, completely stripping yourself of power, of ego, of any point of expertise. And you're just saying, okay, I don't know. And I'm using the methods to learn from you. And I think there's richness in that, but I think it is quite brave to challenge yourself to say, actually, at this point in time, I don't know. And I'm using these tools to learn from your experiences and to grow in my understanding, because I don't share it with you. So can you tell me? And this is the different ways, looking at the string again, going back to the question, is it different ways you can tell me, and kind of your what works in the community, what works with this culture, what works with your participant group and their experiences.
And I think also giving people something to do that involves shared activity towards a common goal. It might be making something, creating something, performing. That seems to make a big difference to people's lives. And the other thing is, you know, one of the things I've observed is you can give people all the therapy in the world and all the drugs in the world, but it doesn't give them their lives back. On the other hand, if people are making something, if people feel that they're contributing, if they're perhaps as a result of being a performer in a dance or a theatre production, if they're kind of the source of other people's pleasure, that seems to do people a terrific amount of good. You know, if what I think some psychiatrists here in the UK call mastery experiences. You know, those sorts of things seem to be very powerful. Okay, shall we move on to another question? Perhaps we could pause for a moment and go back to a question that Andy's mentioned. How soon before we imagine that research can be presented in these other artistic languages? Any comments, any observations?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Is I don't know if anybody else can understand it. Maybe Andy, can you tell us more? Do you mean about how soon this kind of research can be integrated more fully within kind of the academic environment? I'm not sure that's the question. If that's the question, maybe you can clarify. But in my own personal experience, I also mentioned at the beginning, I definitely have seen a big shift from when, like with Asha, I started exploring this method on my own, and I could not read. I was doing this work in visual research, and also using theater in domestic violence, very similar to Shahimi. When I was started using theater as I were doing community theater to do research and visual methods, I was looking literature and other examples. I was finding very, very, very little, nothing, in fact. And there was a kind of more exploring. And now there is definitely much more available, also much more fundings available, still very limited compared to much research, but much funding by medical research received. They are really peanuts, unfortunately still. But I think the fact that we have MeHeLP here, and I'm also mentioned together for mental health, we actually been funded. I think it's a big success in terms of a shift, understanding the limitation of a more traditional research. Also, at Middlesex University, where I teach, we have a visual psychology course in third year and a master by research in visual psychology. So there is certainly much more attention and much more space. And I think these platforms where we together share our experiences, we are learning from each other, we're making people understand why we're using, what was our journey, why did we become, I began as a statistician and now I'm a filmmaker, theater practitioner. Obviously, when we share our journey, how we went through that journey and what is it that make us so passionate about it, the more we do that, I think, the more we can make this an integrated, valid form of research, which is not like this wacky hippie idea, but it's something actually is a valid research. We can learn, we can share how much we are learning, how much we can help shifting some of the very dysfunctional way of thinking within mental health that needs drastic change. And I think creative arts, and work with lived experience particularly, can create the shift we much need.
Yeah.
And
right.
no.
Yeah, you go ahead, Shahimi.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to respond. I think Sanjay sent a question like, why is creative expression limited to the visual performance and music? Isn't it more than that? Yes, definitely it is more than that. It is, like that's why it's creative expressive arts or expressive arts or creative arts. So any art is a help to an individual for their creative expression. So it's not only this dance, music, performance, visual, theater. It's also include poetry, storytelling, art and crafts, and many other forms. But the thing is how we are bringing the perspective. Are we limited or are we seeing it a broad thing? So it depends on that as well.
Can I add to that a little bit as well? So with creative methods, I guess the umbrella that I would also kind of how I would stretch it, is also kind of what we think about creativity. And I think creativity and art is the usual kind of connection. You know, if you're artistic, therefore you are creative. But if we're thinking about research methods, I think creativity will come into problem solving. It will come in how we use what we already have in a new and different way. So it might be, you know, art-based research is considered creative art, and we had a lot of examples here, but also mixed methods is a creative methodology as well, because it's a different way of doing research. Using technology in research in a different way is creative methods. You know, it's that kind of transformative aspect of an approach that you might not be in how you recruit people and how you build rapport with people. You know, if you're breaking kind of paradigm, if you're breaking kind of certain boundaries and you're rethinking, saying, well, why do we have to do it this way? Can we do it this way? And arts is a fantastic medium to help you translate that, but I think it's not limited to just kind of traditional form of art. It can include technology, it can use, you know, methods that we've been trained in, but in a very, very different, innovative way. We can use statistics very innovatively to kind of give us an insight that we might not get before. So it's about just thinking outside the box, I would say.
Yeah, and
So Joan, so I saw a question from Joan.
Oh, right, yes. So we move on to Joan's, or is it Johan's question? Yes, senior citizens. Yes, would you like to make a comment about that, Asha?
Yeah, actually, Joan, I don't know where you're drawing it from. Senior citizens are as active as younger generation, and expressive arts definitely works very well with senior citizens as well in terms of storytelling, the wisdom they can bring in storytelling, their experiences that can bring. And also, maybe Shahimi can respond, at least 15% of the trainees in DMT are like 70 plus. And they are much more flexible than we think. So somewhere we as researchers cannot restrict, because we do not know how each and every individual will evolve. Maybe if you're talking about mobility related issues and senior citizens, then also dance movement works, because there is upper part mobility. So it's only how we are creative even within this creative methods.
See how we can maximize our potential within our limitation.
Yeah.
I think that's very important, and how before using any creative process, creative methods, you know, so the things which we are saying from the beginning, because it's a non-judgmental, participatory, you know, non-hierarchical bottom-up approach, not top-down approach. So that's why it's easily, you know, it's easily engage people. And even in our academic program, even in, you know, TIS, collaboration with TIS, there is in every classes, we have senior citizen who come to study, and, you know, and then they apply DMT as a practitioner into others senior citizen center. So, so I think we should not limit it ourselves. And again, Dr. Brown also started that if you say creative expression, if you say art, what modality you want to call it, it is an universal language. And as it is in the individual language, universal language, so we can speak through it across the gender, across class, across caste, across society. It has a, you know, same unique. So we all can speak through it. And I think that's the, that's very powerful. So anybody can respond to.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen something similar here in the UK. Yeah. A colleague a few years ago was doing dance activities with older adults, and in some ways it seemed to work very well. It tackled a lot of the health and social problems that older people have. You know, it helps to exercise, it helps to improve balance and bone density, it helps to reduce loneliness and isolation. It also, for many older adults, dance was very popular when they were young. You know, through the middle years of the 20th century, before the advent of social media and IT in every home, that was what young people did for entertainment. You know, they went to dances, they went to concerts and festivals, etc. So it's very useful for, you know, kind of building memory and reminiscence therapy too. Yeah, there's lots of different activities that one can do with older adults and everybody else. You know, one of our colleagues, Jonathan Coop, at De Montfort, has done things like gardening and environmental initiatives with people in Nottingham in the UK. You know, getting people together to enhance environments and conservation activities, and that seems to work as well. Or colleagues who do things like cooking and paper making and puppetry and knitting and you know, a whole variety of things. So it doesn't just have to be. We've been talking about theatre and visual methods and dance and so on today. It doesn't just have to be those.
Can I also add? I think it also builds the human and social capital in terms of things, really, and I think that's essential, especially the older people. There was a question around. There is quite a bit of published research in terms of how creative methods can be used with people with dementia, and including in museums and other venues, etc. So it is actually widely used in that, but I think it is not being very popular where actually or people are not aware of some of those things.
Yeah, so are there any other questions or comments or observations from anyone? Oh, there's some thanks coming in from Sanjana, from Johan, and Perba's been thanking us as well.
And Brown, can I also add? Can I just say a couple of things?
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, and just to say, thank you to the India team, thank you to Parvati and Sanjana and Amir for the last 3 weeks of actually putting the show on the road, and without your help and support, this would not have been possible. And the panelists can only need to be there, the panel, but they have to do all the groundwork. So thank you to all, and I think this has been a huge learning curve for us. And I think you've done proud for us all in terms of what is it that you have done. In a limited period of 3 weeks, you have engaged with well over 2,000, 3,000 people and met so many different people from different parts and walks of life as well. So which has been a huge success for us from what I earlier said, from a human and